So we've called the meeting to order. Is there any public comment?
Brenda Tilburg.
Brenda, go ahead. Brenda, you can, oh, go ahead.
There we are. I was just wondering if someone could clarify some terminology on the printed agenda. It says there that you are in executive session, that you are going to be discussing the appointment of a public officer. And I'm not clear what you mean by a public officer, a truant officer, a safety officer, maybe somebody like a district treasurer.
That's actually, yeah,
Yeah.
we're going to be speaking with two prospective board members, one from New Haven,
okay.
one from Bristol. Yeah,
Okay, thank you.
welcome. Was there anything else? Nope. Okay, it doesn't look like we have any other public comments. So may I have a motion to approve our agenda for this evening?
So moved.
And a second?
I'll second.
All those in favor of approving the agenda for tonight's meeting, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions?
Actually, I have one question.
What's your
Sorry.
question?
Under the consent agenda, it says approved minutes. Do we just not have minutes to approve this month?
Yeah.
Good catch. I think because this is I think we've historically or been changing the practice to not approve minutes at this meeting. But at the next meeting, you'll approve 2 sets. Trying to expedite these meetings and keep them focused on.
Oh, in the second meeting, we don't approve minutes. It's the first meeting.
Yeah.
Okay.
So this is more the informational meeting, and it's the business meeting that will approve 2 sets of minutes.
Okay.
Which is the second.
We might want to clarify that in future agendas.
Yeah.
Just went right in this line if I just say no meeting for this meeting.
Okay,
Sorry.
that's okay. So can I have a motion to approve the consent agenda? Maybe a motion that approve the consent agenda minus the absent minutes. And a second?
Did we finish the vote on the agenda approval?
We did,
Okay.
yeah.
I'll second.
Okay. All those in favor of approving the consent agenda, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay. All right, well, we are going to move into our discussion of early childhood systems, and we're welcoming Meg Baker with us today.
And Amy Whitcomb.
And Amy Whitcomb. Amy, hi. Sorry, I didn't realize you would be co-presenting. And Amy,
Here for support.
great. And Meg, your role in the district is?
I'm the Universal Pre-K Coordinator.
Great. And Amy?
I'm the Executive Director at the Bristol Family Center.
Okay, well, thanks for being here. So we've got about an hour to spend with you for however you would like to use that time.
Great. So, Patrick, I don't know, can you share?
Yes, I can.
I don't know. Do you guys want to pull up a little closer?
Yeah. There are 2 seats right here if you want to be.
Yeah, it actually might help if you want to sit right over here.
Yeah.
That way we'll catch you on the owl.
You're breaking up our pattern here. Sorry. I'm good. Okay. The neutral blue. I have a couple problems always.
So I want to say thank you for inviting us first, because it is well timed, because it's, we're coming into the week of the young child, and it's an annual event from the National Association for the Education of Young Children, NACCE, every year. So this was a fortuitously chosen date. I'm going to start with sort of the very basics of early childhood education, and then move into what does that look like in Mount Abe, both within the schools and in external programs, because I want to give a really broad picture of what the early childhood systems look like, and how those intersect with the district role. So that's the context.
Maybe one more piece of context. So you are the Universal Pre-K Coordinator for MAUSD and Addison Central and Addison Northwest. So you're really bringing more of a county perspective than MAUSD specific.
Exactly. Yeah, so, and I'm in my, probably, I think this is my 8th year in that role. So I've been in the role for a while. Go ahead, Patrick. So what I wanted to start with was a very brief 1-minute trailer from a film called Brain Matters. And it just gives some context about the way that very young children learn. It's very much based around those relationships and the attunement of responsive adults, the many different experiences that they have and how those are connected to their earlier experiences and language-rich environments.
Fair warning, I think this is the first attempt to play a video through our setup here, so
It's gonna be
fingers
amazing.
crossed.
So long as the sound works.
Yeah, and that's the thing that's always tricky.
The sound is always the hardest part.
Can we stop and check? That they can hear that on Zoom.
Yes. I'll have to stop sharing.
Because I've had that happen to me before too.
And what might be better anyway.
Beth, were you able to hear the video sound?
No.
Yeah.
So let me, I was sharing my screen from this computer. Let me share that screen from the other computer, which is tied to all of this. That might work better. Give me just a minute. All right, let's try that again.
Very, very short snippet, right? But what I wanted to do was sort of lay the groundwork for it's those early experiences, the first 5 years that are setting the foundation for everything that comes afterwards. And so that piece means that preschool is a little bit unique. You can go ahead to the next. It will, infants are all about the nurturing, caregiving relationships. And we expect a lot of independence and academic supports for school-aged kids. And preschoolers are right in that developmental shift. And so preschool is really unique when we think about early childhood education. We talk about developmentally appropriate practice, and developmentally appropriate practice is the early childhood's field's philosophy around early care and education. It's a little different from what we think of when we talk about school-aged kids, because it is very focused around all developmental domains. So we're talking about physical, gross motor, and fine motor development as much as we're talking about social emotional development, as much as we're talking about cognitive development. And all of that learning is equal in terms of what teachers are trying to support in the classroom. We're also talking about meeting each individual child where they're at on their own developmental trajectory. So a child might be in a very different place than their classmate, but a gifted early childhood teacher is going to meet both of those children's needs. Or even between different developmental domains, a child may have social emotional needs, but cognitively have a lot of skills, and a gifted teacher will be able to build on those strengths. A high quality program is also really looking at the environment as a third teacher is the way that it's often described. We are thinking about free choice and what can we put into the environment to build on children's experiences. I was talking with a Mount Ave teacher in the school the other day, and she was talking about how they were learning about space in her classroom. And so the conversation we were having was about, she's had a bunch of things that she's put in the sensory bin. And so they had a galaxy day one day where it was, I think, purple sand and little stars that, little glitter stars that she had embedded. They were looking at bringing a huge box into the classroom to make a robot. They were talking about creating a planet. We had a whole conversation about paper mache and, how ripping up newspaper, what a great fine motor activity that is. So those are the kinds of activities that really build on kids' experiences, but they're very hands-on, play-based experiences. The other thing that I think is really key to a successful quality program is that partnership with families. Most early childhood programs the teachers are having daily communications with families. I'm doing a lot right now with kindergarten transition. And this is one of the things that I tell families, as families who are used to coming in and collecting their kids and having a one-on-one conversation, the first time their child comes home on the bus and they realize, like, wait, I don't have any of that face-to-face time. It's a big adjustment. And so that is one of the conversations that we have. It's an appropriate shift as kids gain more independence, but it's a shift nonetheless. And the relationship piece, when you're thinking about an infant or you're thinking about a toddler and you're thinking about the continuity that has to be there between home and program and the amount of communication that has to be there, that makes a lot of sense that you would need that daily communication. The other pieces, there are health and safety regulations. So every program for children, preschool and infant and toddler programs in the state, both public and private, is regulated by the Child Development Division and their licensing regulations, which have a lot of health and safety regulations that are way above and beyond and different from what the schools are following, right? And there are solid reasons behind needing to make sure that their electrical cords are placed differently, that fire safety regulations might need to be different, lead might need to be different. Ratios are adult child ratios are regulated really strongly because younger children need more supervision. And so all of those health and safety pieces are really important when you're talking about caring for young children. Would you add anything to that?
No, I think it's really important to think about how we sort of immerse children in learning in a different way that takes a high level of training amongst the staff. And I'm sure you're probably going to touch on that. But I think that's really something that I would want to make sure we talk about. It's just the importance of very intentional planning and training of staff that are going to work with young children.
Yeah, and I think that piece, right, it's very much a learned skill. I've worked with teachers who have elementary degrees who've come into the early childhood world, and it's very different because thinking about the amount of self-help skills that you're teaching young children, thinking about all of the routines that you're teaching with young children, thinking about the environment as that teacher. It's a lot less teacher instruction and a lot more sort of holistic wraparound care and education.
What's meant by your last bullet?
The mixed delivery system. So good segue. So the mixed delivery system is the many different kinds of early childhood programs that exist to serve young children. So we have in our community both public programs and private programs. We have programs that are run out of registered homes. We have programs that are center-based. We have a forest preschool that has a very specific model that it uses in terms of almost entirely outdoor education. So a mixed delivery system is offering families a choice in the kind of program that meets their needs. Working families, for example, have a harder time accessing very part-time programming. Some families want to have a program that is closer to where they work or closer to where they live. Some families really need a therapeutic program or a program that is specifically designed for low-income families and where cost is not a factor. Some families have children with disabilities and they're looking for embedded services. So the mixed delivery system is the many different kinds of programs. And I'm going to talk a little bit more later about what that looks like here. But the universal pre-K system was specifically designed to work with a mixed delivery system. So.
Nick, do you want to take questions as you go, or would you rather wait until we get to the end?
I have questions as we go.
Okay, so Liz has her hand raised.
Oh,
You guys
thank
can't see
you.
that, but
thank you.
you're welcome.
Liz, can you?
Yep, I'm glad that you're going to talk more about the mixed delivery system and the choice that's embedded with that and how important that is. And I think it also goes towards, I'd like you to highlight the bullet a little bit about the under-resourced, get it done attitude, because I see this everybody does everything functionality, but even then, and that's awesome. And I don't know that that's always what we see in the traditional school setting. It's so like the jobs are kind of more parsed out in schools versus in the centers, or certainly in anything home-based or anything like that. Everyone does everything. And also, I assume so when you get to the mixed delivery system part, it's also that each program, if it is an all-day outdoor program, how it wouldn't be able to necessarily be accessible, right? But that's the what those parents want access to for their kiddos, right? They want the outdoor all the time. So I think I look forward to hearing more about how, and I really like what you said about how the different programs meet different people's needs. Because I don't think any one particular program is going to be able to meet the needs of all the families, right? So I appreciate what you've already said and that you're here. Thank you.
Yeah, so the under-resourced get it done attitude, I spent a while talking with colleagues of mine who sort of straddle both worlds. And we were trying to capture what is the core difference between a preschool teacher and who's coming into this work and maybe a school-based and this is one of those pieces that it's hard to capture. The early childhood world for a really, really long time has been under-resourced, right? So this is something that is probably pretty well known, but the workforce and the wages, the compensation for early childhood teachers are abysmal. There's almost never any kind of benefits package, and certainly not like what we would expect for a public school teacher. And I know that I've heard multiple times from early childhood teachers, you know, I would work more if I worked at the gas station. I would make more if I worked at Costco. All of those pieces are absolutely true. And yet we are holding teachers to a very high level of expectation for what they're going to do for our children who have, you know, in those first 5 years. One of the things that has happened in the early childhood world, I think, as a result of being so under-resourced, is everybody has everything and you're just doing everything all the time. Right. So in the school system, there might be somebody you could go to get help with, you know, the vomit that just, you know, went down the floor, or the fact that the, you know, refrigerator is now broken, and or some of those really basic pieces. You probably got really great examples. There might be somebody you could call. In the early childhood world, there's almost never somebody you can call. And so I think that people just get used to doing things that are outside of their job descriptions because that's the way it's always been. I'm not going to say that that's the way it should be necessarily, but I think that's the way that we've gotten used to it. Would you add anything to that?
I think it's because early childhood educators really care so deeply about providing an environment that is child-centered and family-friendly. And so therefore they are constantly just doing more. They do more every day. And it really is with a child focus always. And people stick around. The teachers stick around for it because they care so deeply.
Yeah, and they build those relationships with families. And so if there's something more that needs to be done for a child, they're going to do it. And then I think the other questions were about the mixed delivery system, and I'm going to push those because I think there will be a lot of questions about that, but I'm going to push them until later. The last thing up here that I wanted to highlight is the NACCE standards for accreditation, because those are the sort of, if you're thinking what is quality early childhood programming, NACCE's standards are really the gold standard of what quality looks like. So that's an extra resource. Okay, so before we jump into what does it look like, I want to give you the systems. So in a nutshell, these are the systems that impact all early childhood programs. The first one of these is the Child Development Division. The Child Development Division runs the child care licensing. That's the health and safety standards for all early childhood programs and after school programs. And they put out a book that is 100 and something pages long that is filled with rules. And then they have a supplementary book where you can go to read the information about the rules that wasn't explained adequately. And then if you still have questions, they also have a hotline.
Are they under AOE or outside of AOE?
They're outside of the Agency of Education. So they're under the Agency of Human Services. But that is actually a very important point because it means that all early childhood programs in schools are duly regulated by the Agency of Education and CDD. And any program that is partnering under Universal Pre-K, which we're also going to talk about, is also duly regulated.
And to further complicate, Agency of Human Services, Agency of Education don't always play nice together.
Almost never play nice together. Yes.
Well, that's
Yeah.
all.
Like
Yeah.
double fingerprints, double background checks.
Yeah. So the step ahead recognition system, STARS, is Vermont's quality rating system. And so what that means is that every program in the state is ranked between a 1 and 5 star level, using various criteria, and I could explain the old system to you, but they're revamping the entire thing. So right now, stars actually sort of doesn't exist and sort of does. There's historical stars that you can look at, but you can't get new stars because they're revamping the whole system. And once they're done, programs will be ranked based on how well they do family engagement, how well they do curriculum and assessment, and how well they do nurturing and responsive relationships with kids. So, right, really based on evidence-based practice, what is high quality? And there will be a variety of measurements and documentation that programs will have to submit, and they'll get their stars level based on those things. So, the Child Care Financial Assistance Program, also called CCFAP or subsidy, is a program that offers income eligible families support with affording childcare. So families have to qualify based on their income and based on whether or not they're working. So you really have to be a working family who needs the child care, but who can't afford it right now. There's a big bill in the legislature right now that would shift some of those pieces, or could potentially shift some of those things. But I'm not going to get into what that looks like, because it's changed so many times that I could give you information tonight and it would be wrong by tomorrow.
We're used to that.
Let's see, parent child centers and Head Start. Those two programs I combined because they both offer wraparound family support services like therapeutic childcare, like home visiting, nutritional supports. They are designed to serve some of the most at-risk families. Okay, Act 166 Universal Pre-K is where the school districts, including Mausd, partner with pre-qualified programs to offer 10 hours a week for 35 weeks a year of tuition to a variety of local partner programs. And we're going to spend most of our time talking about those pieces. But it's free access to those 10 hours a week of preschool in our partner preschool programs. Jumping over that one just a bit, because we're going to come back to it. Children's Integrated Services, CIS, offers early intervention and special education services to children who are birth to 3. At children's 3rd birthday, the school district takes over. So there are transition meetings that happen, and the Mausd special educators take children on to start offering school district special education services. But up until that point, CIS is offering those early intervention services. This is, again, the mixed delivery system. And the last thing I wanted to say is about childcare for infants and toddlers. The birth to 3 infant toddler system is financially the most complicated for programs to provide, because you can imagine taking care of multiple babies, right? You can't have the same number of babies that you would as even preschoolers. And so it is so programs can really only sustain those birth to 3 if they also have older kids in the program that can help balance out some of the overhead costs. So, fair way of saying that?
Yep, perfect.
Okay. All right, so universal pre-K, I'm going to come at this from sort of 3 different perspectives. This is the child and family perspective. So I mentioned before, you get 10 hours a week for 35 weeks a year. In order to be eligible, you have to be 3, 4, or 5 before the kindergarten cutoff date, right, which is September 1st. And not already enrolled in kindergarten. The first thing that families do is they enroll in whichever program they have chosen. So locally, that might be Bristol Family Center, it might be Wren's Nest, it might be the Addison County Early Learning Center, which is Head Start. But they enroll in that program, and if they need help finding a program, they often contact me and I can help them find something. Then they create an application, they fill out the application, which is basically 2 pages of demographics and a proof of residency. And they return that, usually they return it to their program, and then the program does a once over to make sure everything's there and sends it on to me or onto their school district. At any rate, it makes its way back to the school district. Many families are enrolled for more than the 10 hours. So those 10 hours are free, and then they pay for any additional costs, or they may use subsidy funding to pay for any additional costs. So there could be multiple layers of funding to support one child in their preschool program. From a pre-qualified program perspective, so these are the requirements that all school and community-based programs have to meet. They have to have a curriculum that's aligned with the Vermont Early Learning Standards, the VELS. And the VELS themselves are aligned with Common Core. So VELS are from birth to 3rd grade. The difference between Common Core and the VELS is that the VELS also include things like social emotional learning goals and physical learning goals. So they're more holistic than some of the Common Core pieces. But when you look at literacy and you look at math, they're exactly the same. But they start at birth with infants and what we think infants should know and do as well. So it's the full developmental span. Pre-qualified programs are required to have a licensed early childhood or early childhood special education teacher. In public schools, you have to have a licensed teacher in every classroom. In private programs, you're just required to have a licensed teacher on site. So they don't have to be in the classroom. So there is a difference there between schools and community-based programs. You have to offer 10 hours a week and 35 weeks a year free of charge. 35 weeks is roughly 35 weeks is 5 days is 175 days of school, right? In a full year program that doesn't take February breaks and doesn't take April breaks, what that looks like gets a little messy. So, but we have our contracts cover that. And they also have to do twice yearly parent teacher conferences, family engagement, and do child progress assessments using a tool called Teaching Strategies Gold, which is a formative assessment that is based on observations and tied to child norms, to developmental norms. They have to have at least 3 stars in this step ahead quality recognition system that I talked about before. They have to meet childcare licensing regulations, and they have to, according to both of those, keep their staff ratios less than 1 to 10, 1 adult per 10 kids. And most of them are smaller than that. Okay, from a district perspective, we enroll those preschool students. Those kids are in our in Power School, in our school database systems, and we include them in our pupil census to the state. So they are weighted as 0.46 of ADM, average daily membership, and they're included in the pupil count. We pay tuition directly to the program, and it's set, that amount that we pay is set by the state annually, and it's tied to an index so that it increases with inflation. This school year, we paid out $3,656 per child. Next year, it's going to be $3,764. So $3,600 to $3,700. And we prorate that amount for kids that move in and out based on a really complicated weekly chart. And then this last piece is about my position, right? So I'm shared, my position is shared across 3 districts. So I do the contracts with all of our local partners. Because families can choose, we have partners that are up in Chittenden County, we have partners that are down in Rutland County. But for our partners like Bristol Family Center, who are here, they may have children from all 3 school districts. And so signing one contract and having essentially one set of systems makes everything a lot easier. All of the forms are the same. All of the payment dates are the same. I know when I work with our Chittenden County programs, even though we've tried to align, it's really different. And so they struggle with those pieces. And it also means that families have sort of one point of contact for me. This shows enrollment over the past 6 or so years across Addison County. So Mount Abe is orange. But you can see that this school year, we have about 400, give or take, kiddos. We lost some enrollment during the pandemic, and we're slowly rebounding. But one of the things that happened is we lost, one of our centers closed, and we lost about 30 slots as a result of that. And so right now, I can say almost every local program, public and private, is running at capacity. So if a family called me today and said, I'm looking for a preschool program, I would not easily be able to find them an opening. And that would not, I would say, have been true a couple of years ago, before COVID. So that is definitely impacting access to preschool. Across the 3 districts, we have 36 total partner preschool programs. 2 of them are registered homes and 34 of them are centers. And we have 8 school-based classrooms, but about 76% of our kids are enrolled in private programs. And that's across the whole county. I could probably figure out how many contracts Mount Abe has, but it requires me going through and saying, okay, you have a Mount Abe kid, you have a Mount Abe kid, you have a Mount Abe kid. This is an easier way of looking at it. But the next graph does show, this is Mount Abe's enrollment, and I broke it out by school. So you can probably see. And this, you know, the graphs, you can see there's been a pretty big variation in the number of children enrolled. A lot of that has to do with birth cohort. Some of it also has to do, Wren's Nest used to be located in, I never remember, they were right on the line near Virgins, but I think they were technically in.
No, they were at Camp Commandant.
They were on Cheryl Mitchell's farm.
Yeah, that's just New Haven, I believe.
No,
I
before
think
that they were.
Yeah, it was, I think,
Going way back.
yeah, I think it was, I think it's New Haven technically, but then they were right on the Virgins line. And so when they moved closer, they're now basically, you know, straddling the Bristol New Haven, the Bristol Middlebury line. And so that means they're taking more Mount Abe kids than they were previously. So I think that has impacted capacity a little bit. And this is the same numbers, but in a chart for people who prefer that. It does include children who are in both school and private programs, listed by count of residents regardless of where they're enrolled. It doesn't include children who go to non-partner childcare programs, anybody that we are not partnering with. And that's most home-based programs don't qualify because they don't mostly have a licensed teacher. Some of our religious programs, and then one or two centers that either haven't met the quality or requirements or have chosen not to partner.
So none of those programs families would be eligible for the 10 hours.
Mhm.
Do you have any rough idea of how many students that might be?
So, I think the easiest way to figure that out is to look at this as two grade cohorts, right? So this is 3 and 4-year-olds up here. And I know that most kids are coming into kindergarten having had some kind of early childhood experience. But I think it's about 80%, 75-80% of kids who are enrolled in universal pre-K before coming to kindergarten. And it depends a little on community and
Yeah.
year, and it's hard, that's hard for me to gauge.
Yeah.
But that's my guess.
And some of those kids could go to a private elementary school, but participate in universal pre-K.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Do you know how many of those numbers, how many are out of our school district? For a percentage?
Off the top of my head, no. I know it's a number I've looked at before. And it's less than it used to be, but there are families, we do have some families who, especially like Moncton families, often go up to Chittenden County and do sort of the Shelburne, South Burlington. Sometimes there's a few families who might go to Williston, and it's mostly about where they're working as opposed to, other factors. It's not a huge number. And there are a few families who go to Middlebury as well.
The last slide.
That's not the last slide. But
Oh, I may just need to get the cursor back to the right spot. Here.
so this is, I mentioned before that on the 3rd birthday, children transition to district special education. We have 1 FTE early childhood special educator and 1 FTE speech and language pathologist. They have right now about 40 children combined on their caseloads. And they are also doing transitions from early intervention, that's part C programming, to the early childhood special education. They conduct developmental observations, screenings, and the evaluations, and they go all over the place. So those services are usually provided in district, but they will go and visit children at the Bristol Family Center. They will go and visit children at Head Start. They have children who come into the Bristol Elementary School program, both in the preschool classroom and who they see in their offices. So all over the place, they're seeing kids.
Those are just for non-aid or?
That's just
okay.
non-aid,
Okay.
yeah.
So I had a question about that. So what is the amount of time kids receive in this program? Like we have our program, at Bristol Elementary, which is our AAA program.
Yep.
And so that's only though a certain number of hours. And is that based on a state minimum amount or on what we're able to provide or?
So the amount of special education services that a child would receive would be based on what's in their IEP. Right, so that would be an IEP team decision, but I think what you're asking is actually on the next slide about the school-based program and
Yeah.
what we provide within the schools. So this is just special education, but this is the school-based programs. And it's a little hard to explain because we're in the process of shifting some things and merging some things, and we've got kind of 3 different things going on. So
Gotcha.
let me try to explain it.
Multi-layers within the multi-layer.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a matrix.
So Mount Abe has a school-based program that is open to all children in the school district. So The program is licensed to serve 26 children at once in 2 separate classrooms. But right now, we have 3 groups of children because they're not all there at the same time. Okay, so the easiest classroom to explain is the full-time preschool program. This started during the pandemic as a childcare program through ELP with for children of essential workers, and it is expanded to be a preschool classroom that serves children 5 days a week. And the hours this year are from 8 to 5:30, and next year they're going to be 8 to 3 with extra optional aftercare from 3 to 5:30. There's 13 kids in that classroom, and it's staffed with an early childhood educator with 1 paraprofessional, and 10 hours are free, and then ELP childcare is the rest of that time. So we're blending the funds from those 2 sources to provide that. Families are either paying for the ELP childcare pieces, or they're getting the subsidy, or a blend of both of those. So there's kind of multiple different sources of funding coming into that program. The other program is the early education program, which is serving 2 groups of children. And this year that's just for 10 hours a week. Monday is complicated, and then there's where they have both groups come, and then there's a Wednesday, Friday, and a Tuesday, Thursday group. 10 hours, doesn't matter how you slice it, doesn't divide even nicely into any, I mean, right, you could do 3 3-hour days, but then you're missing an hour. It doesn't divide nicely anyway, the way you slice it. The classroom's serving 21 kids in the 2 groups combined, so it's like 10 and 11. And there's still 2 staff members. Next year, one of those groups is going to get an additional 7 hours using ELP blended funds. So we'll have a 10-hour group, 17-hour a week group, and then a full-time group.
And is it like a lottery for who gets to get in?
So, yeah, so I mean, this is one of the things that when I think about what my job is, it's all about access and support and quality. And it is tricky to meet everybody's needs, but I think what we're gonna do is we're prioritizing children with disabilities and children from who have other risk factors or who have other marginalized identities. So it's not as true at this moment, but sometimes kids who are multilingual learners and have little English, kids who maybe have other factors going on, DCF custody or a history of challenging behaviors, they might receive a priority because it would be harder for them to have access to another program. So that's sort of how we're looking at it. And we want those classrooms to be balanced. So we've been thinking about things in terms of roughly a third of the kids who maybe have disabilities, roughly a third of kids who maybe have risk factors, and a third of peer models. That's historically how we looked at enrollment, because you want to provide a really inclusive space for all kids. But definitely, I think capacity and questions about access are real. Yeah.
Is this at Bristol Elementary?
It's based out of Bristol Elementary School, yeah.
And is there any transportation provided for you guys?
Nope. Unless it's written into a child's IEP. And then it would be.
Did the pandemic expansion, so before that, it was just the 10 hours a week? Or-
Yes, so
yeah.
before that,
For a long time.
for a
many
long
years.
time, yeah, and 10 hours a week is sort of the amount that's considered full-time by the state. A full-time rate, ADM rate right now is 10 hours a week. And that's weighted at 0.46. one of the conversations about this bill in the legislature, and one that I'm actually going to testify on Thursday, is about whether that's the right dosage of preschool. Most people in the state really feel like 10 hours a week is not enough. Yeah, and that perhaps
There's
if
a
we're
lot of, not enough in this presentation.
Yeah. Other questions about this particular slide or the districts?
I have a question about pre-K special ed and SLP. I want to make sure I heard it correctly. Their caseload together is 40 kids.
So, yeah, and so this year, the early childhood special educator, right, she said she had 15 children on her caseload, and the SLP had 24. It's possible that there's overlap. It's likely there's overlap. And they said they've done 9 evaluations so far this year, with 2 more on the way. So a lot of kids.
And all of these kids come from which towns that are at this preschool at Bristol? Just Bristol or?
No, they're coming. I would have to look. For example, I don't think we have any Lincoln kids this year. We have in the past.
All
But-
towns within MAUSD
But
are
if they're
eligible.
all MAUSD.
It's just a matter of who the students are in a particular year that represent which towns.
I think another piece that, I work in part of this world, and that wasn't clearly laid out, but I'm thinking like putting pieces together. So there's 40-ish kids all over the district that 2 people are trying to go to and serve. And there's new kids popping up all the time, or new needs from different things that maybe don't reach that threshold, but they still support. And all the programs are at capacity within the whole county. Is that what? Okay, there are people moving in who are trying to find childcare for their jobs. And I just,
And what constitutes the 3 hours isn't enough.
right, and I just, the other piece of it is that for the kids who are not within our 4 or 5 town area, if they have a special ed need, they have to come into one of our schools or into a program within our physical area, or they don't get services. So if you live in Moncton and your child needs speech, but you work and they have to go to Heinsberg because that's what suits your family, you don't get speech for your child, or you have to figure out a way to do it, either medical model and pay for your insurance, or figure out a way to get them to Bristol during the hours that work. So there is that kind
So
of,
there's no reciprocity with
No.
other counties.
No.
No, and it's a conversation that has come up a lot. And nobody has seemed to figure out a way to fix that piece. Yeah, because it's a real barrier for families who have kids who have special education needs.
Right.
One of the things that's coming to my mind, and you mentioned this a little bit earlier, Meg, as we contemplate what role does MAUSD have in helping to address whatever concerns there might be around early childhood education or child care. The implications of any expansion in MAUSD on the rest of the system is really important to consider. Part of that is, Meg mentioned the wages for early child care providers. The providers that are working in the MAUSD run program are getting the MAUSD contract where the MAUSD benefits and MAUSD pay, which is 2 or 3x what someone outside of MAUSD would be getting. So if we look to expand, there's a potential that we're going to pull people away from other providers who are probably not swimming in lots of people looking to take on jobs.
Yes.
And that's one example of lots of examples that have to really be considered as we think about our role and how we help the system. We need to really think about that broader system with anything that we do. And there are a lot of, key players that need to be part of any conversations.
Right. I only have a couple more slides left, but I think think they're gonna get you to that place. So there's 7 programs in district that are private programs that serve MAUSD kids. So obviously MAUSD kids go all over the place, but these are the ones that are in district and serve a lot of your kids. They have a capacity right now, a licensed capacity.
So these
of
are
roughly
partner.
93. Yeah, these are all partner programs, in pre-qualified partner programs in the district. You have kids who go down to Mary Johnson, you have kids who go to Otter Creek, you have kids who go up to Heinsberg Nursery School or First Roots Wild Roots. But these, I can't list them all, so just those. And licensed capacity is how many you can serve at once. And it's a little, it's not 100% accurate because you could enroll, if you've got a Monday, Wednesday, Friday kid, you could also have a Tuesday, Thursday kid who fits into that same spot. And a lot of programs are under enrolled. So do you know how many preschoolers you have this year?
I mean, we actually have more than 16 a day, so we have closer to 22.
Okay.
And we're serving 25 preschoolers, 3 to 5 year olds.
Yeah.
A lot of our toddlers are also turning 3, but
Right.
so they fit in that age, but
I think these numbers all I think came from the BFIS system, which is also possibly outdated and wrong.
So I know that Starksville Co-op Preschool has 15 kids, 5 days a week, but with the mix, I think we're at 22 to 23 families.
Yeah.
So
So like I said, these are really rough numbers. Yeah. All right.
Meg, where's Discovery Hill located?
They're in Bristol. Walking distance from central office, actually. I walk over.
Yeah, to be in New Haven.
Yeah.
How does Lincoln fit into this program?
That's this one.
She moved.
Yeah, that's a good question. So the Lincoln Cooperative Preschool is a pre-qualified program. And families who reside in what will be the 4 towns next year, who want to continue going to the Lincoln Co-op, they are still able to do that. But families who live in Lincoln will rely on the Lincoln School District for their universal pre-K dollars.
Okay,
Okay,
is that part of what we're voting on today?
I don't think we're voting on anything today.
There were some adjustments to the exit agreement. Or is that the upcoming,
I think that's up. Yeah.
sorry.
The articles
Yeah,
of agreement,
that's
not
up-
the exit agreement.
Okay.
The Act 46 articles of agreement.
I just want to do a time check
Yes.
too. So I think it's.
Yeah,
7.
Yeah, okay. All right, I'm gonna share, this is. If you click on the PDF of data file, people who are not here can see.
They can't click on
You wanna drop, it's open for everybody to see, so if you wanna drop the share into the link, into the chat, we have a time. We have
We
a
don't have
chat.
a chat.
All right, well, I'll just.
Everyone can see here, it'll be linked in the minutes.
Okay, great. So I've mentioned before, we use TS Gold child progress assessments. They look at multiple developmental domains, and I've been compiling them for a long time now. At a county-wide level. This is not MAUSD specific. And the ones on the left are all the fall scores, the ones on the right are the spring scores. This is looking at developmental norms. Blue is exceeding, green is meeting, red is below expectations. And there are basically 3 things that I want to point out here. The first is that there is a huge amount of growth between fall and spring, particularly when you get to the last page of the packet and you're looking at literacy and math. In literacy, we pretty much always have a third or more of our kids who in the fall are listed as below expectations. And that number drops substantially by the time you get to spring. And the same is true in math. the other thing I want to point out is that there have been shifts with COVID. There's the spring 2020 data doesn't exist because COVID closed all the programs. And especially if you look at things like language, which is on third page, you can see that fall 2021, we had a really big jump in kids who are below expectations for language. But it looks like it's starting to rebound a little bit. So it's that's encouraging. And then the other thing that I would say is that our social emotional learning scores and our mathematics scores are almost always among the lowest that we have countywide. And we've used that information to really highlight areas that we have need for professional development and to focus on.
So then the assessments not really take much into account the sort of the natural learning curve you're talking about from fall to spring. Is that why you're seeing that bounce?
So they're based on norms are in a band. So the idea is that anywhere between a 5 and a 7 might be within the developmental norm for a 4-year-old, for example. But yes, in the fall, you would expect that there might not be as many 4-year-olds who are hitting that meeting norms
Sure.
as at the end.
Right. So the norm doesn't change. It's just when you're measuring it.
Yeah. Yeah, but it's because it's along a band, you want kids to sort of fit somewhere within that developmental trajectory for the entirety of their 4-year-old year. Does that make sense?
Sort of. I just, when you're saying
Yeah.
that we always have more kids falling under at the
Right.
beginning, I mean, that's seems totally natural.
Yes, it does, except that even at the beginning of the year, you
They
want them
should
to
be-
be in the band.
Okay.
Yeah. What we expect for developmental norms, and you want them to move further along within
There
that
should be more
band.
blue at the end.
They should be, they should be close to the purple, which is kindergarten.
Yeah.
Krista Liz has her hand raised.
Oh, thanks. Liz?
Sorry, thank you. I just because I heard your time check, Krista, I do see it, but I just wanted to know if there was anything that either of you had for ideas about how we as a school board or a school district could support perhaps looking at it as lessening the number of kiddos on waiting lists or to increase accessibility to the programs. Like what would be helpful from us as a board or a district to do to help you guys out?
Are we done with this, all the slides?
The last slide is a thinking forward slide, so it's actually a good segue. Which is thinking about, if you're thinking about changes, and if you're thinking about what can you do as a district, these are some of the pieces that I want you to really think about, which is, what is the district role within the whole landscape, right? And why do you want to offer more early childhood programming? And so that has to be, you want to think about, are we wanting to meet the needs of working families more, or are we wanting to provide more inclusive programming for children who might otherwise have access? Are we thinking about the needs of children who have disabilities or marginalized? You have to have a vision for what is the role and what is the purpose. And because everything in the early childhood system is so interconnected, it's going to be really important that you involve a broad group of stakeholders in making any of those decisions, because one of the conversations that's happened a lot is if you put all the 4-year-olds in the schools, then programs will be able to serve more infants and toddlers. But the fact of the matter is that most of our programs, and yet Wren's Nest is a great example. They're a forest preschool. There's it's very unlikely that if you took their 4-year-olds out, that they could transition to being able to serve infants and toddlers. They're an outdoor program. It's just not something that's gonna make a lot of sense.
And you were saying earlier that the older kids help to subsidize
Right.
the younger care.
And that's the other piece, right, is so the interconnectedness of all these systems means that it's really hard to pull one thread and not unravel anything else. So whatever you do, I think that you want to make sure that the needs of all kids and families, when you're thinking about access, when you're thinking about supports, and when you're thinking about quality, that you're thinking about all of those pieces. But you're gonna have to think about it with a much bigger audience than the audience that's here.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, really helpful.
I think to get back to Liz's question.
Yeah.
I mean, you obviously have a great perspective. It'd be helpful to understand if you were sitting in her chair,
Mhm.
what you might start out with some suggestions, that would be a helpful thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think our region could use more programming for kids, especially kids who are really struggling with challenging behaviors. This is the biggest need I'm seeing right now is kids who, for one reason or another, are being asked to leave programs, and where I don't have another program that will take them necessarily. And that's really challenging. That's the biggest need I see right now. But I think capacity overall, and I think that would be a great place for the district to start, is thinking about how can we either encourage others to build classrooms or create those classrooms within our buildings. But I also think nutrition, and I think about transportation, and I think about all of those other pieces that fit in there, and that gets messy, pretty complicated.
And the 2 FTEs with 40 kids.
Yeah.
Remember, those are combined, the 40.
Yeah.
To that point.
Yeah. It's probably, because there's more, you're right.
Not that we couldn't use more wonderful professionals, I'm not saying that, but I'm just want us to be careful. That has her hand raised, Kristen.
Go ahead, Beth.
Hi, I just wanted to add that we have just hired a early ed special educator, and she will be working 20% dedicated to our preschool MTSS program that we're going to be starting. So, that'll really help those kids that Meg was just referencing. They're not on an IEP yet, but their behaviors are impacting their learning and access to their classroom. So hopefully through our MTSS system, starting at 3 years old, we can use our resources in our building and district. So I'm really excited about that. And she comes with quite a bit of experience. And so we're constantly looking how we can build the capacity within our schools to meet all kids. But now starting at 3 is really exciting. And Meg, thank you so much for all you do, and good luck tomorrow or Thursday during your legislative discussion. But I appreciate all that you do.
And I think this is scratching the surface, it sounds like, of a very complicated issue. So thank you for coming to us. And I think we will probably have something to talk more about and probably talk with you again.
Yeah, and I'm happy to answer questions at any point if anything, doesn't make sense, but I figured this was a lot to give you to chew on to begin with.
That's great.
Great presentation.
Thank you
very much.
Thank you, Amy. Okay. So we have two different folks that are going to be joining us to express their interest in serving on the board, which is very exciting. And we're going to meet with them both in executive session. What we're going to do is go into a breakout room for each of those. I think, can we do one executive session for both folks, Patrick, and then just excuse people and bring people in. So, so
well, I was
Kathy is
thinking-
here from New Haven, and so she has already been approved by her select board. And then, are you Mike?
Yes.
Hi, Mike. Mike is here from Bristol, and Ian is here for the Bristol Select Board. So,
So the easiest thing might be to invite folks into the breakout room.
mhm,
And then I'll bring my actual laptop into our physical breakout room.
okay,
And then we'll have that conversation with whichever group you want to go first.
Yep.
And then we'll dismiss those from whichever town we start with.
Yeah.
From that breakout room and invite in the next group.
okay. So can we have that all happen under one motion, executive session motion? Okay. All right, so we'll need someone to move for us to go into executive session under VSA 313A3, which is the appointment of a public officer.
I'll second. Sarah?
Okay.
All in favor?
And then I just want to clarify, in that executive session, we're going to have first start with Kathy Apgar from New Haven. So Kathy will move you into a breakout room, and then we'll join shortly. And then we'll excuse Kathy, and then we'll invite Mike Dash in from Bristol, along with Ian Alvinson from the Bristol Select Board. And we'll also be inviting in Patrick Green. So all those in favor of that executive session with those attendees, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, so I would love to encourage a motion.
Check audio.
Can you hear us, Kathy? Yes, okay. So we need to have a motion to appoint Kathy Apgar and from New Haven and Mike Dash from Bristol as new board members.
I'll second.
I'm sorry, who moved?
Aaron and Kristen. Okay, well, before we take a vote, I just want to say thank you so much to both of you for being here and expressing your interest. All those in favor of appointing Kathy Apgar and Mike Dash to the board, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, well, welcome aboard. Hooray. Thank you. So we have, Mike, I'll give you this now, and if you'd like to pull up a seat, you can join us at the table. And then Kathy, if you get a chance, this is the oath of office, and you can just fill that out at the central office on Munsell Avenue, and Jennifer can notarize it for you. Jennifer Bauer is our administrative person, and she can take care of that.
Could you, is it possible for you to email it to me and then I'll have it notarized in the town of New Haven? I work in Burlington every day, so I don't get back in time for your central office to be open.
That's fine. Can you just send me an email, Kathy? So that
Sure.
I don't forget to do that.
They don't usually.
All right, great. So our next action item is to adopt new committees, and what we thought about doing was taking time for the remainder of this meeting, minus maybe 10 minutes, to break up into the groups that folks are interested in as potential committee members. I made copies of the charges that were proposed for the committees and the worksheet that we got from Jeannie. And in the case of the finance committee and the facilities committee, Kevin actually entered into the worksheet some of the comments from our discussion last time, which is great. But there's a blank one here as well. And then I have one for the community engagement committee. And so
You mean policy and governance or?
no, so I have your charge and your worksheet, but Kevin
also along with the charge for the finance and the facilities committees, he captured on the worksheet some of the notes.
Yeah.
So I've included that too. And then I have one for the community engagement committee. So,
So 4 committees.
correct. So there are 4 committees. Brad is not here and Kevin is not here. Brad expressed interest in the finance committee as a priority. And Kevin expressed interest in the facilities committee as a priority. So, and then we have the policy and governance committee, and we already have board members who signed up for community engagement. So I don't know if folks were I mean, I was thinking 1 committee per person
I think that's
seems
reasonable.
reasonable. So Sarah and Liz, I don't know, oh no, you're on the community engagement committee.
Who's on community? Yeah, can you actually list it?
Yeah,
Who's on community engagement?
community engagement is Bailey, Liz, Kristen, and myself.
Ellie, Liz, Kristen.
Yep. And then Sarah and Erin. Do you have any thoughts on where you might want to be?
I don't want to be on community engagement, so that one seems full.
Yeah, so right now, we've got policy and governance. And I'm assuming Steve is going to be with that. We've got community
So
engagement, which
weird.
is full. We've got facilities committee with Kevin and finance with Brad. So Aaron and Sarah and Mike and Kathy. Yes. Can think about where they might like to be. These 3 are new committees. And so right now what we're doing is looking at the charges that some folks drafted and a worksheet to help us think about what actually these committees would do, and spending time in these small groups, and then we'll come back together and take formal action on adopting these committees. The community engagement committee is already in existence, already has a charge, and already has members, so we might just spend our time reviewing that charge. But currently there are already 4 board members on that, so we'll probably ask that you pick a different committee.
One question I had.
Yeah.
I don't think we resolved what we talked about. Was whether or not we're going to continue with the work group for facilities, or whether or not we're going to do a board committee.
Right.
So what I think I heard, and someone can disagree, is that work group needs board members, ideally, right? And so I think if you're interested in that, you should go sit with the committee, and it might start as a work group, and maybe morph into a committee, but it still needs board representation. And does that sound right?
I don't think it makes sense to have both. I
Yeah,
think there'd be a lot
correct.
of redundancy. So
Correct.
if there was a question about whether or not there'd be a facilities committee of the board and when it would get started, et cetera, and there were some things that had a little bit more of a timeline need, then that might have been conducive to. So my sense is the work group would morph into the facilities committee, should that get its charge and have membership and become a thing.
Have we even formed the work group yet?
It's in the process. You might actually have something in your email now trying to get a date together for the group that was identified.
Okay.
So I
And it's-
think,
We could get this formed before we even finish that process.
Yeah. I agree.
I think the main thing is to identify folks that are interested in serving on that topic, because it is going to most likely either morph into a committee if it doesn't start out that way to begin with.
And
So,
ideally, I'd rather have a vote on that. I'd rather have a vote on whether we're gonna work group it and morph, or whether we're just gonna start with the.
If this is something that gets legs today and it's an action item, so it has potential to be,
Unfortunately, the head guy is not here.
right? I think if we're looking at a couple of weeks or something, if it's on one of the next couple of agendas and gets launched, I think we're probably okay.
As
In terms of a
as
timeline.
board committee rather than.
And not start the work group of it more.
Liz has her hand up. Liz, thank you.
I don't have an answer to Steve's question, but I would like to offer that if either Mike or Kathy were interested in community engagement committee, that, you know, they could do that, and I could work on the finance worksheet since Brad's not here. I could jump in on that one, just in case, you know, they feel like that's a particular skill set for them. So I'd like to just offer that position from there, and I could still show up and just take notes or something, but I could do one of the other committees so that we feel like we have enough people working on them. Just
Okay, what do you think, Sarah? Where are your heartstrings tugging you?
I'm pretty flexible, to be perfectly honest. I'm just reading through the worksheets now.
Mhm.
I mean, I read them before, but I'm reading them a little bit differently.
Now that it's real.
Now that it's real. Yeah, I mean, part of me is maybe more interested in the finance, but I'm really, I would be fine with any of it. Or the government, I need to go back and read the one Steve made also.
Yes, the game time decision, I like the policy and governance one because I'm working on the ownership plan already.
I like that idea.
Well, it's also probably, it may also be fairly heavily ends related.
Right,
One of the charges,
which would be cool.
proposed charges or agenda items was to kind of look at the ends policy and see if we want to revise it or augment it with maybe some sub-level goals that are more metric based, that you could, you know, allow us to sort of just monitor more short-term progress towards improvements rather than achieving the whole giant end goal. I think that's actually one of the bigger lifts, I think, in that committee.
Kathy, do you have any thoughts on where you would like to land on a committee?
I'd either be on the finance committee or the facilities.
Okay. How about you, Mike?
Governance or finance, but honestly, since I'm just going off the title, I'm pretty flexible either way. Right.
I think
It's a little hard to commit. I don't know what the prospectus is for either of those, any of the committees. So
Yeah, we haven't been able to distribute any
That's
of the
what-
charges.
Yeah, that's what we're gonna try to talk through tonight. And if it turns out that you, as you hear the charge for the finance committee, you're kind of thinking, maybe actually that's not really where I'd like to be. That's fine. I think what we need to do right now is just get into groups to talk through a little more closely what the charges are. See if we can't come to some consensus. And then if there needs to be some shifting, I think that's okay. Something else that I don't know that we clarified for you, we were talking about it with Mike earlier, is that we have 2 meetings a month, and our hope is that one of those 2 will be set aside for committees to meet, unless the committee decides they want to meet at a different time. So right now we meet the 2nd and 4th Friday, Tuesdays of the month. And
not this month,
what's that?
but not this month.
Vacation months throw. that
Yeah,
schedule
sometimes
off.
it gets a little
Yeah.
thrown off, but we have the 2nd meeting of the month is always like our full work board meeting, board work meeting. And that first meeting is often, like tonight, we hear a bigger topic, where we dive in a little more deeply on something and have some discussion. But we're talking about, trying to use that time for committees to meet, so that committees aren't then having a 3rd meeting time. So just so you know, we're trying to keep things limited to 2 meetings a month. So one would be in committee and one would be as a full board.
And I think one of the suggestions was that, we might start the committee meetings on the first Tuesday, but then the committees would make up their own schedule after that.
If they
So
decide.
if it was more conducive for the committee to meet on Friday morning or something, just throwing out an example, the committee could decide to do that, and that would be their second meeting of the month.
We might still need.
So am I clear?
It's
to
just so it would be
understand-
more flexible
Right.
for when the committee meetings would
Yeah.
be.
So are these the only 4 standing committees on this board? Community
Now-
engagement, policy, governance, finance, and facilities?
Right now, we only have one standing committee, which is community engagement. And so we've been talking about and exploring the idea of adding these 3 others.
Okay, thank you.
Haven't Really done that yet.
And the only other committee, which I think we already voted on, was the
Negotiations. Yep, and that is going to start in the fall. We've got 2 folks that'll represent us at negotiations. Yeah. What if we try to get into some groups now, and maybe the group that Kathy is with, someone can just bring their laptop? Does that work? So she can join. I think Kevin shared his thoughts for facilities, and they're pretty well documented here, so I think it's okay to meet without him. I do know that he wants to be a part of that group. Steve, do you want to take the lead on the policy and governance?
Sure.
So Aaron, do you want to convene?
Was it just Aaron and I at this point for
I think
P&G?
so.
Mike wants to meander a little.
So let's see, facilities, who else was interested in facilities?
Kathy said her name.
Did you say facilities, Kathy?
I said facilities or finance or both.
Okay.
And I don't know, Kristen, you had expressed interest on the work group.
Oh,
Would it
yeah, do
shift?
you
I
want,
don't
you can
know.
shift too if you'd like. You don't need to stay on community engagement.
I'm gonna stick with that for now.
Okay,
Yeah,
You're gonna stick with what?
community engagement.
Community engagement.
all right.
Krista, I feel like community engagement has like a lot more members, so I would be interested in facilities.
Okay. All right, so let's see. So we have Sarah. Kathy, can I have you hang out with Sarah on finance for right now? And just at least look at the charge together? And Mike, can I have you hang with Bailey and look at the facilities charge? Oh, no, you
Switch that.
said finance.
Yeah, I think we switch those, but.
Okay,
I can
great.
do whatever, it doesn't.
Sorry.
at this point,
Mike?
it's-
Mike and Sarah are gonna talk finance, and Bailey and Kathy are gonna talk facilities.
Krista, you mind if I just throw out another approach to this?
Sure.
And we can stick with your path. I just wanted, since this is kind of the start of all of these, and the board actually kind of has to approve the charges for
Mhm.
each of these. I'm wondering if it might make more sense, especially with new people who have not seen the charges,
Mhm.
to simply go over the charges as a
I won't
group.
take that one.
Okay, that's fine.
As a.
I think what we wanted to do is not wordsmith each charge as a full group.
Yeah, no, we wouldn't, I don't think we.
You
would
just
do-
want to go over them.
I think we just
Sure.
run through them for
Sure.
everybody. So actually, everybody can kind of understand
Okay.
what all these things are gonna do. Especially without Brad and Kevin here.
So I wonder if maybe what I can do, Kathy, is send you the charges electronically.
Or you can actually share your screen and you just come
Oh,
up with
that's a
it.
great idea.
I'll do that.
I probably need to send it to you. Let me do it that way.
You either send it to me or log into the Zoom, one of the two.
I'll send it to you. Okay.
You send it to me and to Zoom me? Zoom
Wish
at
I-
MAUSD,
Sounds like a flat stand.
something like that.
Okay, so this one.
It's policy and governance. And so I'm sending it to Zoom. No. MTA Zoom,
Should be Zoom at.
MAOC.
Yeah.
Okay, and Patrick. Okay, so that's policy and governance. And then,
We can start with that one if you want, Patrick, and then
Should do one at a
Krista
time.
can send you the rest of them.
yeah, that's great. Yeah. Making them different. Yeah. Nothing like that.
All right, so so this is policy and governance.
Will it help if I increase the font size a little bit?
Sure.
And so the first piece of it is really what is the makeup of the committee? And I had originally proposed 4 members of the board and 4 resident members, 4 community members. And that was basically so that there could be community involvement and that we could have 1 member from each town potentially. But Brad had noted that we struggle with having getting meetings lined up with folks, and 8 people is a lot of cats to herd. And potentially this might make more sense being half the size. So 2 members of the board, 2 community members. And we don't have to finish that debate, but that's one thing that has to be considered here. And then we would be asking for administrative support. And Patrick, we would want to talk more about just what would that role be and who would be the most likely person to help with that. So in general, what the general charge, we scroll down, is here, what do we want this committee to do? So policy A4 governance process basically says that we're going to be a policy governance board, and that we're going to adopt new policies and review and monitor current policy. And essentially, this committee's purpose is to assist the board with that process. So we would be looking through what is needed for new policy from either from government or from a recommendation from potentially the Vermont School Board Association, or something that's come up in an existing policy that people have noted need to be changed. And as we're monitoring policy, going through old policies and saying, hey, that language just isn't current anymore, or it really needs to be tweaked, or boy, that's bad English. And, we need a different interpretation. All of these things, the Policy and Governance Committee would kind of look at, review, and come up with some edits or new policy proposals. And we would do this on kind of a scheduled work plan that we would coordinate with you, Krista, so that we could sort of look at what policies are coming up for review. And you could see what we're working on, and we could make sure that both our work plan and the board's general work plan are in sync. We just keep scrolling down, Patrick.
Do we just deal with board policies, or do we also deal with like superintendent policies or other policies?
Well, where we're defining executive limitations in our policies, we would deal with that.
Okay.
But anything that the superintendent creates, which is a procedure, not a policy,
Okay.
we would not be involved in.
Okay.
Other than a potential sounding board,
If you want to bring something to us to say, hey, this is what we're proposing for procedure, and we'd like your opinion about it, that's one thing, but it's not our role to create your procedures. Obviously, other assistance if there's governance activity or education that the board needs, and the board would ask us to help with that. Our sole responsibility or our sole authority is simply bringing recommendations to the board. We would not be enacting anything at the committee level. And we would provide an update to the general board on a monthly basis, as do all the other, other folks. So a little bit more detail about these efforts. We put together a work plan as to what we're going to review. Keep going, Patrick. And this is just some detail, looking at new and existing policy, reviewing VSA model policy, maintenance and language review. Also kind of working on the tools that we have to look at our monitoring reports. Right now, it's a little bit difficult to find the monitoring report that we're supposed to work on. What were the past comments? Did we decide to do anything with those comments as a board? Should we be paying attention to them in this next monitoring report? So maybe looking at a tool that might make that a little clearer and a little easier to follow in terms of our history of our work. And then scroll down a little further.
Keep going.
No, stay up at the top a little bit. Just this one thing about looking at how we're doing monitoring reports, and maybe developing third-party monitoring resources and some resources as to how we might monitor by direct inspections if it's determined during monitoring review that we want to utilize those tools. So it's kind of creating a toolbox to help with monitoring. And then this method statement is really just to be sure that the committee has some governing principles of its own in terms of what it's going to focus on and how it will conduct itself. Education and training. We would try to look and see what educational resources are out there that we could start with and be sure that we all understand what policy governance is. And that, so that we're doing our committee work, that we're first on what we're doing. And then also maybe potentially, if we find that these resources are helpful, bringing those to the board's attention. And I think also part of this group's work could be developing a better starting block for folks like Kathy and Mike. So when they join the board, there's a set kind of curriculum and tools for them to kind of dive into, and here's how our Google Drive works. Here's how, we monitor. Here's how we blah, blah, blah. So there's just a better kind of introductory curriculum for new board members. That's kind of the charge. If you kept scrolling down, the one thing that I did here as I was building this was I just threw some things together. The VSBA has a model policy review service. They kind of put that on hold for a little bit. I forget why, and I got to check in to see whether that's been brought back online again or not.
I think it has. I think their recent bulletin just
They fired that
referred
back
to
up.
it, so I think
Yeah.
it has.
So it could be that we could have, we can see what kind of help they might be able to provide, and just kind of overviewing what we've got set up right now, and if they have any suggestions about the way that it's working. This next thing was just a blurb about what committees do versus what the board does, and I think it was really just to rub Don's belly to make sure we weren't diving into something that was more than what a committee ought to be up to. Keep scrolling down. Just some resources on what the policy governance folks said. Stay up at the top a little bit more, Pat, sorry. So yeah, policy governance FAQ, like there's just a couple of resources here. And here, Chris, is where I started to dive into when I was looking at trying to create this charge. I was trying to look and see what resources were on our drive and where they were filed, and it turned into kind of a, oh my God, there's like a bunch of old ANSU stuff from when it was transitioning to this board. And that stuff's sort of still there. It kind of confuses where you're trying to look. So I think one of the things this committee could also do is work on a proposal to reorganize our filing system, for lack of a better term. How you find things when you jump onto the drive and where they're placed. And it obviously would need to be talked about with you and Jennifer, Patrick, about what the effort is and how difficult that is, and whether IT thinks it's a good idea or a bad idea.
Sure.
But just in terms of trying to figure out where we would actually put our work, that was the thing that I was struggling with, and which brought that all up.
Yeah.
Scrolling down a bit more.
Just on that for a second, I think that's a good, just in general, where are the committees going to be putting their work? Because I'm the keeper of all things community engagement on my drive right now, and that's not a great system.
No.
Not to mention is my system not so great, but.
Right, so there's a little bit of that going on. You had brought a good article up for review on just how we review policy and applying equity lens to it. But I think if you keep going, this is the initial agenda. So the very first thing was, there is no policy in our policy packet that says, how do you create a policy? That was the first thing I was looking for. I couldn't find it. There is a model policy for it. So we would look at that as the very first thing, so we would have a policy process. We sort of follow a policy process sort of informally. But this would make it more official. We would look at the VSBA's model policy website. They have a whole list of suggested policies. We would look through them, see which ones we thought were pertinent or not pertinent, or, oh yeah, we should really have that one. Sandra Lee, who's a former board member, had made some recommendations about PGC work in one of her monitoring reports. So I have that linked here just so that we don't lose track of those suggestions, which everybody thought were good suggestions. I noticed that we have duplicate language in two policies that we need to clean up. The ends policy, as I was mentioning before, is a big lift. This is trying to look at our ends policy and see if we can look at the way that we're monitoring it right now and find if there's a way to sort of add a little bit more detail to what we're looking for or what we can measure to provide maybe a more a cleaner metric for determining compliance or non-compliance. And then both Aaron and Brad had different policy governance notes in some of their policies that they were monitoring, that we wanted to sort of tie into and see if we wanted to assist with that work.
There are also a couple of other policies that I think I know I had some suggestions around language, so there's a couple of other out there in the universe that
I know that the one that we just a group of us, Bailey and I, and
All of us.
this table, this side
right here.
4.1, I think it was, we looked at, and I had a whole bunch of edits that I looked at when I was reading it. Like, just the English made me shiver through a lot of it. And we didn't change any of those because that wasn't the process. So we weren't there to modify the policy, we were just there to monitor it. So one of the things that we would do here is to look at that policy and we would put the changes that we were suggesting to make in the policy out for the full board to look at, but we would do the homework to get to that point. So that's the policy governance committee charge and a potential initial agenda.
I like that we're actually doing it this way because it makes good sense for all of us to be reminded and for you new folks to even hear what these committees are before you sign up for them. And since we're doing it this way, I wonder if we want to go back up to the charge. And I mean, I do get nervous about trying to wordsmith the charge
Mhm.
as a group. I don't think that's a good use of our time. But I also think that this is that, you know, maybe there's some level of agreement we can come to about it as it stands and agree on the formation. And if the committee decides to do further tweaking that they want to bring back to the board as they undertake their work, then we could amend it.
I think that was gonna be my next suggestion.
Yeah.
Was that instead of the board trying to wordsmith these charges, that we simply look at them on the whole, agree whether or not we want to form the committee, which is really what the action is tonight.
Yeah.
And then allow the committees to kind of put their heads
Yeah.
together and wordsmith the charge and bring it back
Yeah.
to the board for approval.
So
What do other people think about
well, I was
that?
just gonna say with like less than 20 minutes left in this chunk of time, are we gonna have time to read through with that level of detail and all of them and?
I mean,
make that-
yeah, and I think what Steve is saying is, can we just go through the other three or two really? And
and
then
the end of that
agree on the
thing.
formation of them and take action on that tonight. And then.
Because that would answer the facilities question, I think, if we could give that
Yeah.
a thumbs up.
The only thing I'm thinking about is the membership, if there's any value in the board weighing in on the numbers tonight. To
Yeah,
help shape, to inform the folks that are gonna go off on their own.
yeah,
Because if one keeps 8 and the other decides on 4, like, are we starting to get?
I think we should aim for 3. If we're making 4 committees, can we aim for like about 3
mhm.
plus or minus 1 on each? Are you allowed to do that?
I mean, I think,
And I don't know how we feel about the community involvement. I think, Chris, I liked your suggestion last time that the community involvement wasn't made official. In other words, folks were invited to participate, but they wouldn't vote and they could either come or not come.
correct. So it sounds like two things we should solidify in addition to whether we are in agreement with the kind of general scope of the committee is membership and community member involvement. And I'm wondering if we did like a, you know, at a minimum of, you know, number of board members or
Well, does it look right now like we would have the ability to put 3 people on each of these committees?
Something to think about in terms of numbers. Because they are subcommittees of the board. They have to follow board expectations, which mean in terms of quorum, et cetera. If you have 2 board members and they're the only active members, everyone else is sort of a non-voting member. Those 2 board members can't talk about the work they do outside of the meeting, because they are,
Yeah, even with 3, you're gonna run into a bit of a problem with that,
right,
because even 2 people talking about it is a
you're still a
quorum.
quorum, so.
uh,
I don't think it's the end of the world, but it's something to be considered in terms of open meeting law.
Oh, so you can't just go get your work done. You have to
have a
like,
meeting.
have a
So you
proper
have the
meeting
warrant.
to do all
If
this.
you have a committee of 2 or 3 board members,
Okay,
2 of those people can't talk to one another. Because it would be a quorum doing business outside of a warrant meeting.
I think I'm less concerned about that than I am in getting enough people to be on the committee and having the quorum for the meeting to happen.
Yep.
Right, because I think that's a harder thing is if you don't have,
I think this committee is really valuable for where we are.
What if we just say? Just more than one member of the NAUSD board. That doesn't cap what we can do, but it. Makes it so there's more than one person.
How does that work for quorum?
You mean a minimum of 2? That would be the language.
Then at least it open-ended because if all of a sudden we're fluctuating and 4 people want to be on our 6.
Yeah, I mean,
people wanna be
actually
on it,
saying the number exactly is maybe not helpful because it may be that more than 2 people want to join, but
right, that's what.
Set a minimum and leave it at that.
Yeah,
I think that makes sense. That would fall more into where Brad thought we might land in terms of participation. I
and we
mean, right now we have 2 people.
And we could make that across the board, you know, for all the committees. And, you know, I remind of what Jeannie was saying when she met with us about forming committees and, you know, we should be evaluating them every year. So maybe we realize, you know, that's not a great,
Or it takes more than two to do this work or whatever.
right. And so if we say minimum of 2 for all committees, and then with the community participation and for Mike and Kathy, so the Community Engagement Committee has had community members participate at all of our meetings, which is great and really valuable. But we haven't made them formal board appointed committee members because it just gives more flexibility for folks who are interested at different times in participating. And it also means that the board isn't prohibited from meeting if, you know, a certain number of those folks aren't able to attend. And also the board has a very particular role and it is a committee of the board. And so the community members are there in kind of an advisory non-voting capacity. So instead of having formal community member appointments to the board, we'd welcome that participation, but maybe make it more informal.
And I think that could be a broad statement for all the committees as well.
Yeah, can we just make committee membership all the same for?
Yeah.
I think that's what we should do.
How does it work for quorums if you say, you know, 2 or more board members? Are we going on the 2 or are we going on like, oh, there's typically 4 people there?
I think the language
Membership
is
is.
a minimum of 2.
Well, and I think it's the committee membership of that.
Yeah.
What, like right now, the Community Engagement Committee constitutes 4 board members, and so.
Well, so that's just what it has to be, right? Not what it is. So if it is 5 members,
So
then the
that's
quorum would be, right,
Okay.
right,
And most boards list
right, the members.
what committees people are on. So once we are on a committee, then we'll know how many there.
So with that in mind, should we read the other 2?
Yes, and before we do, I just want to pause and see if Kathy or Mike have any just general questions. There's a lot of like lingo thrown into that policy description. So is there anything you want to ask about that committee and what it would do? That Steve did a great job of giving an overview, but
The one thing that I might have missed, Kathy, is I do think on the agenda, you had, you know, if we wanted to explore different governance models, that was also in here, basically, you know, that we could look at either tweaking policy governance into something of a hybrid, or we could at least explore and see if there was any interest to move in any direction. That would be part of our charge.
you're good?
Yeah,
Okay.
thanks.
All right, so we're gonna move on to the Finance Committee. Steve, you were doing such a good job of walking us through. Would you keep going? I know you didn't write this charge, but
No, I know,
Are we good with membership then? I think we talked about before that, about
yeah.
language being consistent.
We'll make.
We've got 10 minutes, Steve.
okay. I just gotta find Kevin's thing here.
Oh, I guess and then this worksheet and then get the charge.
It's pulled up. Do you want to look at it on the screen, Steve, or would you rather look at it on your computer?
Oh,
This is the finance committee.
okay.
Any background you want to provide as to why we
Well,
kept?
Kevin wrote this, and I think he pooched it from BU and some other
Oh, then I
committees.
did read it a while ago.
Okay.
But essentially, right now, we're brought financial information on a monthly basis by Patrick and Floyd, the business manager. And the whole group is sort of expected on a monthly basis to kind of try to digest financial statements. We also have to, you know, Patrick has a budget process that we go through in the fall, that there's, you know, an initial budget is proposed, we get some feedback, and then that budget keeps getting updated by the month with information that changes on a state level. And you know, it's sort of the whole board has to kind of grapple with this financial information when it's not a strong suit for some folks. It's also a lot to digest on its own, even though we have a lot of other business to do in our business meetings. In addition, we have a statutory requirement that we sign off on all of the district's expenditure receipts. I forget what they're called, payroll and pay orders. And that's in the old days when it was a small district and a small, maybe a small school board with a small school, those folks would go in on a Monday morning and sit down with the business manager and look at, every single receipt and, oh, did we really need to spend this? And I think it's a carryover from those days, but the number of receipts we're looking at are in the thousands. And it's a very difficult process for anybody to kind of grapple with in terms of trying to be really responsible about it. But we do have to sign off on them every month, and we do. But this committee would be maybe more focused on maybe looking at, they take 1 month and look at payroll, or they take 1 month and look at a certain type of expenditure and really get to understand it a little better. They would maybe look at all of these in general and sign off on them and sign off on them for the board. I know when I serve as the board's representative to the Career Center, and that's the way they operate. In other words, their policy and governance, their finance committee signs off on the payroll on a monthly basis, and that's done for the board. So not every single board member has to be involved with looking through every single receipt. It's just kind of a way for a group of folks who are a little more financially savvy, have a little more bandwidth to look more deeply into both, our budgeting and, fulfilling our fiduciary responsibilities. And that's essentially I think the bulk of what's going on here. If you want to scroll down, they would look through the draft audit in more detail, for instance, rather than the entire board trying to digest, the whole 100-page audit. That group would be more educated and more involved in the audit specifically, and there might be an audit session that they would go through with the auditor. Again, this committee's sole authority, at least here, would be to bring its recommendations to the board. And for instance, even signing off on payroll and pay orders would be their recommendation. They would recommend that we sign off on these things.
Excuse me for 1 minute, Patrick, can you just scroll back up for a minute? I think also something to keep in mind is the board's, 30,000 foot view as well, which I think this bullet captures around ensuring how our financial picture squares with our goals for students. And so I think there is a concern that we not get too deep into the weeds of our day-to-day budgeting. And I think that's really important, but to know enough to be able to, not so much looking back at what's already happened, but to know enough to know, are we positioning ourselves in a smart way financially to meet the goals we have for our students?
Right.
So I think that's probably the most important part
Yeah,
of this.
that's a very good
work.
point. Yep.
We have 5 minutes in this section if we're adhering to the schedule.
Well, having been the person from New Haven that would go in every Friday morning or every other Friday morning when Jim Lombardo was the superintendent, I would sign up to 300 checks by hand.
Yeah.
So I can understand it very well.
And I think if the supporting work as you scroll down, Patrick, I think is kind of this is just going over pretty much exactly what I've already said. And he pushed this from what I wrote, just keeping in mind things that you want to pay attention to while you're doing your work. Education and training basically would help, organize some training workshops and stuff for the general board and for themselves, and could maybe help with putting together some stuff for new board members.
And these descriptors will will be sent to Mike and myself as new board members or with everybody?
I think what we were talking about doing is potentially just agreeing tonight to actually form the committees.
Mhm.
And then we would actually charge the committees with looking at these charges in more detail and wordsmithing them and bringing them back to the board for full approval.
In the meantime, I can email both of you with the working drafts.
And then
For all
the other
the
stuff
committees.
that Kevin included here was really just some background information on what the other districts are doing around us, what CVU is doing, what Addison Northwest is doing, what Addison Central is doing. So that's some of the background information he provided, similar to what I did. So the next one is facilities. And this starts out again the same way that P&G did, which is just saying 4 members, but we can scroll down through all of that. Get down to what this committee is actually going to do. So this will go over, this group of folks will go over with Patrick and the facilities folks, you know, what the analysis of all of our facilities needs are, help to prioritize them, see if they're aligning with our education planning, see if they're aligning with our financial realities. Again, they would just simply bring recommendations for moving forward on any projects to the full board. They would help develop, review and develop the long-term capital and operational maintenance plan for any sort of new improvements. They would serve as an advisory committee. And they would basically also bring that information to the board and help with community engagement for supporting the work that they deemed they were in support of. This is the same discussion about taking into consideration all the things we need to consider, and education and training are the same thing. So that's a pretty brief and quick one. Essentially, at this point, correct me if I'm wrong, Patrick, it's been a little bit of the superintendent and the facilities group have been working a little bit with really almost no board direct involvement. You kept us up to date as to what you're working on and stuff, but it's since we haven't limited anything that you've been charged with doing, you've essentially been setting those priorities with Floyd and with Joel.
Yep.
And this group would just have a little more oversight of that and provide a little more board feedback on what direction you felt was appropriate to take. And if there were things like, obviously bonds to be brought forward, or specific projects that needed something to be pulled out of the capital reserve fund, we needed to go to the voters for, that there'd be some support from the committee to help with that work.
Yeah, I think it makes sense. It's sort of in line with the intent with the work group. It was one thing when we didn't have as much money, but now with the passage of this last budget where we almost doubled the money we have, knowing we have big projects, so broader
It's a competing
perspective,
interest
more
potentially about what project to spend it on.
exactly.
Yeah.
So I think it's good timing, and it makes sense where we are now, where we're going forward to start building this kind of capacity.
Right.
But it would seem logical to me that there is a fair amount of overlap between facilities and finance, that there should be open dialogue between both of those committees on an ongoing basis.
And actually, there was a proposal originally, Kathy, that Kevin brought up to combine these two committees, because CVU does it that way. We thought initially, however, there was maybe enough of a lift on both of them that it might make combining them rather cumbersome. And also, I think that it may create enough of a workload that you'd be kind of questioning, is this really a committee? It's almost handling a very large portion of the board's overall work. So that we're weighing that both ways, and I think what we ended up with here was to keep them separate for now. But it certainly might be an adjustment down the road to combine them.
And I didn't pull up the community engagement committee. I don't know if you wanted to walk through that or.
Well, that one is formed, so, and we have people on it, so. What our group should do is revisit this to make sure it's still applicable.
Yeah, I think it's the same as the first task for these other groups, is
Yeah.
to go through the charge, wordsmith it, and come back and have the full board approve the charge.
So do folks feel ready to take a vote on the formation of the Policy and Governance, Finance and Facilities Committee?
Just to be clear, do Mike and I have voting authority tonight?
No, you have to sign your form and
Not until the oath is done.
But once we vote, you can surely indicate your interest in a committee.
there's nothing stopping you from providing an opinion.
Correct.
And that might be helpful. I mean, one of the things we're trying to do, I think, is move this agenda item forward as fast as we can to get started on it. So, I mean, we could table it and put it off until you voted, but if both of you sort of are a bit of a thumbs up here, then, we wouldn't be sort of at a crossroads when you jumped on board, you know what I mean?
Do we do them all together or one at a time?
I think we can.
I don't know, there's a reason to separate them.
Oh, that's okay.
Move the slate.
Okay. All right, so can I have a motion to approve the formation of the Finance, Facilities, and Policy and Governance Committees?
So move.
I'll second.
Okay. Any last discussion? All right, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Well, this is exciting. We have 3 new committees. Okay, so now that you've heard a little more about these committees. Yes, Steve.
I'm wondering if we needed to add, since we don't have official charges,
Mhm.
should we add something to that motion to say that each committee will be charged with, will be tasked with bringing a charge recommendation to the next board meeting?
Not a Robert's Rules expert. I
I
mean,
do
it
think
sets an intention, right?
technically a
So-
committee doesn't exist without a charge.
That's what I'm
And
saying.
charges are in draft form right now. I think there's not a whole lot that's gonna change conceptually. I think the big picture is intact. But to your point, that what was on the screen tonight is probably not the exact language that the charge will land on. So I do think there probably needs to be some action in the future, at least, to with the official charge, with that language as it stands, and say that's it, and that's how it stays until the board again takes action.
So we either let it stand or we've already voted on that. So how do you go back and change it now?
You'd vote to amend.
You vote to amend.
Even
yeah.
after it's been done?
Yep.
Do you want to offer an amendment,
Sure.
a friendly amendment?
I move to amend our last motion. Our last action. To say that the board
You just say as amended with amendments.
Or
something.
What if we just make a new motion saying, I move to that the first action of each committee will be to define their charge and bring it back to the board for approval. Just from doing the monitoring report on committee structure, Patrick's right on that there, whoever's doing that is gonna need to do the formation of the committee. So we could just make a second motion as
I
to
don't
the
know if we
first.
can. Haven't warned it.
I would almost lean toward amend the first one pending final approval of the charge or final review of the charge.
Yeah.
But somehow it has to get that
Just keep
that
it-
qualifier in there that there's a little bit more.
Or we could vote to approve the drafts.
Yeah, I would say, amend the previous action to say that we adopt the new finance policy and governance and facilities committees pending approval of a draft charge created by the proposed committee members.
Well, wouldn't be a draft.
It's not gonna be a draft.
finalized-
Pending approval of a charge
of a Finalized chart,
brought to the board.
because you have drafts right now.
Are you allowed to meet if you don't have a charge?
Well, we do, we have a draft chart.
And I also think, Krista, as chair, your responsibility would be to, in that charge, appoint members or in the motion, like it has to be documented. And typically the authority to appoint members to a committee rests with the chair. You'll have an idea of who wants to be on them and you can appoint as people have expressed interest, but that official appointment.
Yeah, so this
Needs to be
really
clear.
records the intent to adopt the new committees.
Mhm.
But the actual formal formation of them, I think, is the next step.
Yep.
And that has to be with
So
a
is,
final charge, and you have to appoint the members officially.
And probably each should have a chair.
Yes.
so. Are you suggesting, Patrick, that we get clarity on who are going to be members of the committees now and? Oh, no, we can't do that.
I don't know that it has to happen now, but
Okay.
when it's like official, the charge is set in stone effectively. And the members that you're appointing are very clearly articulated and who the chair of that group is. And it could be co-chairs. I mean, there's some flexibility there, but I think those are the pieces that need to be articulated when the official formation happens.
Are we going to assume that? That will happen at our May, that these groups will convene on May 2nd? I mean, because it sounds like we kind of need to.
I think we would be prepared to do what you were suggesting we were going to do tonight. In other words, these groups could break up, wordsmith the charges,
Mhm.
and then.
In May, you mean?
Yeah,
Okay, so we need to amend the motion how does this sound? To adopt new committees pending approval of a charge and committee member appointments at a future board meeting.
So can I just listening to you, I had to amend the formation of new board committees, finance, facilities, and policy and governance, pending approval of a final committee charge and appointment of members by the board chair
at a future meeting.
at a future meeting.
Yeah.
But I thought what I heard is that the first action you're going to ask of each committee is to develop their own charges and I mean, that would be the amendment that I would suggest, that the first action of each committee shall be to create charges for their objectives.
I think the challenge is the committee doesn't exist
Until it has. a
without the charge.
Right.
Yeah, so we're basically going to have to do this as board work
At a
in our
meeting.
regular board meeting.
It's effectively board work groups.
Yeah,
I mean, the alternative is to table it. And we know that we are thumbing the committees. And then the committees, we are, saying that these committees are gonna get together and finalize their charge. People are gonna express interest, these work groups. And then we'll just vote on it at the next board meeting.
I think it's
Okay.
gonna be hard to organize and set it up outside of it being at the board meeting.
yes.
Right, but that's why I'm saying we could vote on it on May 2nd if the committee, is the assumption is that the committee would use the May 2nd meeting for their first meeting.
Sounds great.
If all.
Well, if it looks like we're gonna have to do that anyway, at least now we'll have Kathy and Mike on officially. Kevin and Brad, we could try to twist their arm to show up for this and.
So May 2nd would be what we were gonna try to do tonight, which
Yeah.
is committees in their meetings. We could do it that way, that May 2nd meeting is, the first hour is committees in their meetings doing this. And then the second hour is we
Officially adopting everything.
adopt and appoint. In which case do we need to amend?
I think we could just, we could have a motion to.
Because would committees be meeting between now and May 2nd anyway?
No,
And if they wanted to, they could, but I'm thinking that if we're gonna be using our first board meeting of the month
As a committee.
as a committee meeting, you're still gonna get to meet. And
Doing the first thing you're supposed to do.
doing the first thing you have to do.
Yeah.
Why can't we do both? Why can't we amend what we said and then use May to finalize it?
The only reason I think it might be better not to do that is only because. This way we would have. Kathy and Mike's. Vote, and we'd have Brad and Kevin vote.
Well, this vote's a little less imperative than the finalizing of them, right?
If Brad, if for some reason Brad and Kevin had any kind of objection to. Not combining finance and
I don't think so. I mean, I heard
Facilities,
from both of them.
they were fine with the way this was set up.
Yeah.
and-
I think they both were like, awesome, go for it.
Yeah, well, I mean, I guess this could be,
I think you're articulating a desire for more clear intention, right?
well, it does, it provides intention anyway.
Okay, so let's-
What we've done.
Right.
So let's do the amendment. Can you read it again?
To amend the formation of new board committees, finance, facilities, and policy and governance, pending approval of a final committee charge and appointment of members by the board chair at a future meeting.
And that leaves room for exactly what you're talking about. At the next meeting, if there is a strong push and everyone agrees to merge two,
Okay.
you still can.
sounds
Okay. All the, so we need
Steve first.
I'll make the motion.
Okay.
Come in, yeah.
all right, all those in favor of the motion as amended, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, I'm still gonna be excited. All right, thank you, everyone. So, before we go to public comment, I did just want to go back really briefly to the appointment of a public officer, because I just wanted to give Patrick a chance to just clarify a little bit of what we learned about the law and the time constraints around appointment as it applies to Moncton.
So I'll qualify this as our current understanding. I've spent some time with Dina today, unpacking an email that Jennifer received from Vermont School Boards Association around filling vacancies. So everything that happens tonight's great, so don't worry about any of that. But by law, within 30 days from the date in which the school district clerk notified the select board of the town where a seat was not filled, that 30-day window is the window in which this board has the option to appoint someone to the board. After those 30 days, and it's a little gray when that time starts ticking, right? Because it's 30 days from when Jennifer let the select board know. It's a bit circuitous in that the board clerk or the select board clerk from the town is the one who notifies Jennifer of the election results. And Jennifer then is supposed to turn around and tell the select board that the town clerk works for that you don't have a seat that's filled. The reality is Jennifer talks with the town clerk and Jennifer assumes her conversation with the town clerk goes from the town clerk to the select board and says, we don't have a seat. So the actual date upon which that notification occurred, which is when the 30 days starts ticking, is something we're trying to figure out. If it is the 8th, which is the day after the election, when we would have known if a seat was filled or not, 30 days takes you to Friday of this week. If we have up to 5 days is sort of the grace period, the latest it could be is Tuesday of next week, because it's calendar days, not work days. So essentially, potentially anything after Friday of this week, maybe anything after Tuesday of next week, this board may not have the authority to appoint someone to the board to fill the Moncton seats that are not filled.
Ever again?
Correct. There's a process to get Moncton members on, but the process is, we think, again, we're sort of in the middle of clarifying this, we think someone from Moncton who wanted to be on the board would have to go to the Moncton Town Clerk's office, get a petition, get signatures, hold a special election, get elected to the board, in which case, unlike an appointee only fills the rest of this year until there's election. If there's an election, they fill the rest of the term for that seat. So if there's 2 years left, they're elected in to fill those 2 years, not just until the next election.
So that talks about Dawn's spot, but what about the one when we had the Lincoln spot? Is that because that
It's
was
the same
still on
process.
the ballot?
Because it was
the same?
Because theoretically, there could have been a write-in candidate, even though there were petitions, so the clock kind of resets to the same day for both of those seats.
So we need to know somebody who's gonna be on the Moncton, from Moncton in the next 2 days. Or this is it.
So we need to know, we need the Moncton Select Board to be okay with it, and this board has to take the action to appoint.
That means we just
And,
choose.
and there were already 3 people who have evaporated.
Yeah.
So, probably a fairly small pool. So,
Okay.
but I don't, it would probably be good for us to let the Moncton Select Board know that that's the position we find ourselves in now, or I don't know.
Yeah, because it does sound like there might be someone in Moncton that's still interested.
Yeah, yeah, that's,
And the Moncton Select Board wanted to have an opportunity as a select board to sort of weigh in rather than an individual from the select board, which meant waiting for another Moncton Select Board meeting to happen. Which, before we knew of this, fine, like it's important that the select board feels like the process they want to use is the process they get to use in this sort of collaboration that we have, or consultation. But this timeline makes that trickier now.
So.
sorry, Kathy has her hand up.
Just for clarification, if nobody from Moncton actually steps forward and you can't recruit anybody from Moncton, can you go to another town to make up those, to fill those seats?
It's written into the Articles of Agreement, specifically how many seats and what those terms are in the Articles of Agreement, so it's.
Thank you.
Yep, Bailey.
So am I being the only Moncton representative right now? Can I reach out to,
Everybody you know.
well, but like, can I reach out to the select board?
Sure.
And
Yeah.
and kind of like get on this?
Mhm.
Okay.
Mhm.
And we would have to have a special meeting. It can be by Zoom, so it was extended where we can have exclusively virtual meetings. So it can be a single item, relatively quick meeting.
No, but we gotta meet the Friday cutoff too.
Yeah,
have to
this
approve-
board would
appoint
have to
them
act
by-
by Friday. Again, we could extend into the first part of next week, potentially. We're working on that, but for sure, Friday is safe. Beyond Friday is in question.
And I've
It's a
talked,
holiday in some places.
Friday.
I've talked a little bit with John McNerney and Steve Pilcher about just appointing in general, and so, yeah, so they know that the seats are open and all that, but.
Yeah, John and I have talked a couple times too,
Yeah.
trying to brainstorm people who we might want to approach.
Yeah.
And so, again, it puts an onus on them if, to honor what they have expressed an interest in, if they wanted to have a special meeting by Zoom to talk about the one person who's expressed interest. And then we could follow suit the same day or the next day. It would just have to happen pretty quickly as well.
Yeah, and we really can't lose those seats. We need to keep them available.
Yeah, I mean,
That's,
it's not that they would
that's
be-
the first crucial part, right?
Yeah. They would still be there. It's
they
just,
would be there, right? It's just that someone would have to get petition signatures and then the town would have to.
So
hold an
just
election.
the other part of that too, so that if we can't find 2 people by and get this done by Friday or Tuesday or whatever, then do those seats disappear forever or just until the next election?
the seats don't
No,
actually
they're
even
not.
disappear. Those seats remain. Moncton gets 3 seats for as long as the articles of agreement say they get 3 seats.
We can't.
And so they would sit empty.
Procedure just changes.
You can't appoint until the next
Becomes a-
election.
Right, or like Patrick said, the procedure is a little more onerous,
Right,
a lot more.
and
onerous.
expensive,
Yeah.
because if he has to hold a special election, that's very expensive. Okay.
Yeah, Kathy? Oh, from before, okay. All right, so, I guess we're at public comment.
Although I guess just to close that loop, Bailey, if you get any insight as to what direction it looks like this is gonna go, if you can email probably the 3 of us
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
we'll follow whatever information we get from you in terms of putting together a quick meeting
Okay.
sometime between now and Friday.
Yeah. I will see what I can do.
Liz has her hand up. Liz.
Liz?
Oh, no, it's down.
And there might be, should it come to that, there might be some way to make it a positive if, I mean, maybe your select board could do a town like floor only vote, like, right, like a special, whoever shows up, maybe that's an option in your town. Or if they're elected that way, perhaps they don't have to get petitions done next March, right? Because people who are appointed still need to do the petitions just at the next election, right?
Yeah.
So, like, you know, there'll still be a way to maybe hopefully work if get the seats filled, I hope. And good luck. Thank you for trying.
Okay, moving on to public comment. I don't think there's, well, Beth is here. But I guess you're not the public hearing district. So no public comment. So for May meeting preparation, I just wanted to let Mike and Kathy know that at the top of every board agenda is a link to our work plan, and that's how we build our agendas every month. And so you'll see that it's, a lot of it is already pretty prescribed. And then we have a column called items to add to future agendas where we keep track of things that are coming up. And I wanted to just point out to the whole group that for the meeting on the 18th, we have 1, 2, 3 executive sessions scheduled. Right, so it's, yep. Those tend to be a little long. And then we are going to try to start the conversation around elementary school choice. I can't remember, Patrick. Did you share that thread with the whole board?
Just the 2 of you at this point.
Okay,
The email thread.
yeah, do you want to provide any?
Yeah, I can.
I got
Maybe-
an
Email.
email from you on this.
Confusing families.
Yeah.
Oh, I guess I did send that to everybody.
Okay,
Yeah,
all right,
that.
great. So,
Can we talk? We don't really want to talk about that right now.
no, I just wanted folks to know that I had reached out to Patrick to say, what's the timing? When would be most, it's been on our priority list for a while. But, in terms of what timing makes sense, and sooner rather than later seemed good. And so we talked about maybe inviting Carolyn, who's the preschool transition coordinator, to be at our meeting. I don't know how it will all
There may be others.
plan, roll out, yeah.
I'm also wondering, like, we just talked tonight about forming a policy and governance committee, and we're talking about a school choice policy. I don't know how that impacts what direction to go with this. That's worth thinking about at least. The timing becomes complicated probably, but
But we
could
do
certainly-
some models.
It could certainly be, I mean, when we went through this before, we did get some examples from other,
Correct, and those we're gonna try to pull together to share with everybody. in
Right.
advance.
and the merger study committee went so far as to say, if we merge, this is the policy that we would have around school
That is
choice.
suck. So there's a lot of groundwork already laid, and then we'll have some time to hear hopefully from at least one person, maybe a couple others with the landscape, and then
did the merger study committee also hear testimony from somebody at Virgin's about the school choice topic?
Probably Sheila, who sat on essentially all of those meetings, spoke to the policy and how it worked, and maybe school board members, because they had board members on the committee as well.
I was wondering if we might come again to weigh in.
Mhm.
On how it's working.
And they actually have a transfer policy and choice policy. And unpacking how the two are similar or different may be helpful. So I can reach out to Sheila and try to do some of that homework as well.
But it could be that the full board hears all this and then charges the policy and governance committee for
Drafting,
drafting something like
correct.
Sounds like a good discussion for the next time we talk about it.
Okay.
Go timekeeper.
Language.
All right, so if there's nothing else, we will do our meeting evaluation.
I have it up.
Okay.
Ready to go. Level of engagement, high.
Aye.
Agenda followed, yes, but I added, we moved back and talked about one agenda item for the appointment of board members to talk about the Moncton thing, and we amended one motion.
Great.
Does the chair effectively establish the agenda materials for distribution to the board? Any
Mhm.
comments on that? Is the chair effective in fostering a professional culture regarding fair and open deliberation, full participation of all members, and ensuring the integrity of board process? Yes, any comments? Other feedback for the chair?
Good job.
Good job.
Go team.
Keep it up.
And then, what went well with the meeting, I added, we had 2 new board members join. And then lots of great information about our early childhood education model and use. Anything else, we could add the adoption of the draft
Committees.
committees.
Like a great board highlight.
So Kathy and Mike know these evaluations are all saved and they go into our review of our work over the course of the year, which is one of our policies. So it's a way that we monitor how we're doing.
And then just one last one, any suggestions for improvement for future meetings? Okay.
All right. So I will get to Kathy and Mike. I'm sure there are things for you folks that I'll need to provide, and I'm gonna find out what they are, and then I'll do that. But in the meantime, thank you for being here, and can I have a motion to adjourn? Kay Toy and Aaron Jipner seconded. All right, all those in favor of adjoining, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Thank you, online folks, for joining us.
Thank
And welcome Kathy and welcome Mike.
And Kathy and Mike, we'll get you an MAUSD email set up pretty quickly, so you can look for
That was one of the
communication around
things I
that.
wanted to